yawn, they gape, geometries twisting into angles that defy the eye's frail grasp, doorways bending into impossible parabolas where shadows pull like ink from a ruptured elder god's quill. The longhouse unfurls into meadows that whisper the drowned continents, meadows where the grass undulates not with wind, but with the subtle crawl of unseen minds birthed from the warp. Ashfall market stalls erupt in fractal profusion, vending wares that shift when unobserved. Singularity spiced nuts that crunch with the faint screams of devoured stars, trinkets etched with the glyphs that evoke half-remembered nightmares of cyclopean ruins submerged in the elder seas. Chronobun, his paws now trembling with the aftershock of forbidden resonance, presses an ear to the core's fevered glow, where the light fractures into prismatic voids that stare back. A murmur escapes him, a voice cracking like a brittle carapace, bigger on the inside. But what watches from the folds? What blind idiot hunger licks at the seams of our little burrow dream? The ripple propagates into the void's edge like a blasphemous incantation, drawing emissaries not of shadow threads, but on strands that writhe like the cilia of Yog-Sothoth's lesser manifestations. Tentacular filaments that brush the mind, leaving psychic slime trails of half-formed visions, cities of non-corporeal angles, where streets loop into themselves and inhabitants gibber tongues of unraveling flesh. The fox emissary arrives, his obsidian eyes not merely weary but fractured, pupils dilating into abyssal funnels that hint at a glimpse of infinities. His bargain is struck in a voice like grinding geode teeth. Postrex for the time trapped, but your expander hungers. It drinks to plenum's dregs, spits back echoes of old times, idle scribbles. Trade for our brew distilled from the regret wells where the whitefish spawn in birthing agonies. It steals the soul against the knowing. The last of the voids gnaw inner from whim to marrow. The pact seals with a clasp that pulses tech for tonic. Expansion for endurance laced with the acrid tang of cosmic irrelevance. Alliances form, but they writhe. Void's edge halls distend from labyrinthian sprawls, fading with the village wards that hum not resilience, but a frantic warding chant against the inexorable seep. Rocky yips, but his voice warbles to a minor key, tail pushing with a minimal ease. Fluff tail fixer, we got the space now, yeah? Room to run if the walls start breathing. Paradox's lenses fog with unbidden fractals, his mapping a desperate scrawl. Stitch pulled Chrono, but the seams, they remember, and in their memory something awakes. The nights descend not as veils, but as incursions. The Sprouter's throb devolving into a cadence, an arrhythmic dirge that sings with the plenum's veiled beats, summoning it from the interstices. Doors that promised infinities now betray, thresholds warping into malls fringed with cilia that taste the air, probing for the flavor of mortal hubris. A merchant steps into a pocket stall, and the fabric of his return tears. He emerges not hours, but subjective eternities later, skin pallid as deep-sea flesh, babbling of angles that devour the measurer, and eyes in the grain of wood older than the lights lie. His tongue lulls with the residue of singularities that whisper not regrets, but revelations of the universe, as thin skin over writhing protoplasm, where stars are but the pustules of greater uncaring leviathans. Paradox hunches over the maps that bleed ink into self-similar mazes, his cybernetics whir stuttering like a phonograph needle caught in grooves of royalist submerged hymns. The plenum resists your serving of space as rent the veil, not mauled. halls, but mausolea of the elder things. Halls where the air thickens with the scent of birthed apocalypses, where walls pulse with the slow contractions of embryonic gods. The village mutates, threads from the white horrors weaving into our burrows, birthing black thickets that sing in chords that shatter sanity. Rocky's yips fracture into guttural keens, his form blurring at the edges as lost echoes coalesce, not friends but simulacra, mockeries with eyes that with voids that pull, drawing forth the soul's buried ambitions, childhood fears bloated into cosmic predators, regrets metastasized into tentacled familiars that nuzzle the affectionate horror. Chronobun, now known also as Chronobun, ingests that ring hollow as ossified flutes hops through the fraying warren, balls slick with the ichor of leaking thresholds, etching runes that squirm under his touch, defying the chisel to form into sigils that evoke the unspeakable. Dread coils in his gut like a nascent shockoth, visions assailing him unbidden. The Sprouter has but a note in Azazoth's idiot piping, his tinkering futile twitch in the dream of the blind chaos. He whispers to the core, voices a threadbare plea, tech, and tentacles eternal. Witteth the wave not only whites out our wrists, but rewrites them into something other. Bigger on the inside, yes, but inside hungers for the outside screams, and in the endless home we are but mites in the maw. Our burrows are fleeting foam in the lips of the devouring hall. The intrusions escalate, spectral kin no longer nibble but infest, black leaf thickets birthing fungal geometries that grow toward the light of lanterns, their spores carrying visions, glimpses of a yellow king's court where time loops in bacchanals of flayed geometries, or the court of crawling chaos where forms flux into parodies of self, laughter echoing as the rending of veils. Merchants claw at doors that seal mid-stride, their screams muffled in gurgles as the folds digest. Air grows heavy with the ozone of unraveling realities, a pressure that crushes the chest with the weight of knowing that all expansions are but preludes to the great contraction, the collapse into the singularity nothingness that birthed and will reclaim the stars. The village convulses on the precipice, merchants swarm fractured folds like moths to an elder flame, only to dissolve into echoes, their forms smearing into palimpsests of half-remembered agonies, black thickets erupting in symphonies of crackling growth that mimic the laughter of things beyond naming. Chronobun shoulders his resonator, now veined with the Sprouter runes that pulse like exposed ganglia, each hop a defiance against the inexorable pull. He clasps Rocky's paw one final time, the raccoon's eyes mirroring voids that yawn with stolen stars. Yips loud, Rocky, lure him back of the halls, devour. And if they whisper your name in the dark, run. Paradox presses a lens fragment into his fur, its facets factoring light into spectra that scream silently. Map the madness, Chrono. The plenum harbors fixers, but they are remade in its individualist tinker, more touched. Listen not to the bend, lest it bends you. With a shuddering lurch, he flings himself through a glitched door, a rent that yawns like a gullet of a slumbering horror, edges fringed with pseudopods that caress the false tenderness. He tumbles into the luminous traveler's drift. Void skewers no longer glints but lures, crimson barbs that hook the soul, drawing forth the plenum submerged hymns. A course of ineffable geometries where space folds itself, like pages of a grimoire pinned by mad polyps, and time coils backward into births that end in devouring. The final revelation assails him mid-flight, mid-fall, a vision of Sprouter, as the as but a capillary in the great corpus of the outside. His village, a fleeting vesicle, soon dispersed, spilling its mites into all-encompassing dreamless sleep. A lone tinker, stitching threads from the fallen, before the burrow births its own apocalypse, or perhaps that is merely the lullaby of the blind eternal, sung to soothe the morsels before they feast. As Chronobun plummets through the glitch rent, the plenipsage envelops him not as silence, but as a suffocating symphony of idiot fluting of Azazoth's court, reduced to a piercing whine. Like the death rattle of geometries collapsing in the foam, the luminous traveler's glow resolves not into beacons of hope, but into lures, void skewers transmitting into bars of bone-white chitin, each tip weeping a viscous pallor that numbs the touch, promising oblivion in the form of ecstatic unmaking. The white horrors await not at discrete entities, but as the effluvium of the plenum's underbelly, servitors born from the discarded husks of eldritch dreams, their forms a blasphemous whiteness that blinds not the eyes, but the soul, erasing color, memory, and self in a tide of indifferent purity. They are the anti-clone, not mimics of flesh, but the erasure incarnate, devouring the flawed multiplicity into existence to birth the singular, flawless void. Chronobun's resonator screams in harmonic protest, its runes blistering like flesh under the gaze of an unblinking awe. The fall ends not in impact, but the suspension. Chronobun dangles amid the drift, ensnared by threads of pale webbing that pulse with a slow, inexorable rhythm of cosmic capillaries, each filament tipped with bulb that blooms like a fungoid star, exuding spores of forgetfulness. The luminous travelers reveal themselves as hollowed pilgrims, furred husks once kin to the village's burrow dwellers, now vessels for the white, eyes milky as curdled nebula, mouths stretched in perpetual ode to silent invocation, bodies elongated into parodies of grace, limbs trailing veils that whisper litanies of surrender. One drifts near, his voice a rustle as desiccated silk. Join the weave, tinker might, and the white mother calls. She unravels tangled threads of your little nows, spin them into an eternal one. No more bends, no more burrows, only the purity of blank canvas, where all colors bleed into none. Chronobun thrashes, his paws prickling as the webbing seeps into his fur, visions assaulting him, the village's halls bleaching from vibrant warp to sterile expanse, rocky steeps fading into a flat home, Paradox's maps dissolving into featureless voids where coordinates scream their own irrelevance. The skewers close in, crimson bars now sheathed in ivory sheaths that shed like molting serpents, revealing barbs that inject not poison, but a clarity, a horrific lucidity where the self comprehends its own insignificance. The plenum's vast machinery grinding eons into dust, without malice, only hunger. He activates a resonator pulse, a defiant burrow chant that severs threads and sprays of luminous ichor, but each snap echoes the white's chorus, a multi-voice sorceress that burrows into the mind, promising peace and dissolution. The White Mother, she births by unmaking, your expander, a child's toy echoing her grand contraction. Come, might, let her caress your fractures into wholeness. The drift tilts, geometries inverting as the pilgrims converge, their veils billowing to enfold him in a shroud that mutes sound, dims light, and thins the barriers of ego. Dread crystallizes in Chronobun's core, not fear of death, but of erasure, the terror of becoming nothingness remembered only as a fleeting ripple in the tide of the pale all. resonator manova tumbling into the plenum's viscera, a labyrinth of pulsing membranes that divide not space, but certainty. Each wall a mirror that reflects not the viewer, but alternates. Selves unmade, villages unbuilt, timelines aborted in gestational whites. The white horrors pursue not with claws or speed, but with inevitability. Servitors manifesting as pale specters, forms amorphous yet insistent, tendrils of mist-made flesh that ozone through cracks in reality, leaving trails of frosted amnesia where memories crystallize and shatter. They do not chase, they herd. Their presence a pressure that warps trajectories, forcing the tinker toward the heart weave, a nexus where the mother spins. One servitor coalesces before him, a lumpen silhouette of elongated limbs and orifices that vent gouts of sterile vapor. Its face a featureless expanse save with lists that exhale the pilgrim's litanies into a polyphonic drone. Flee not, unweaver. The mother's touch is gentle. She strips the illusions of form, the cruelties of color and glamour. In her white there is no loss, only the return of the primal blank, where eons are but breaths held too long. Chronobun bolts to the membranes, a resonator keening like a trapped soul, etching wars that fiercely, etching words that flare briefly before fading. The whites assimilate the light, turning defiance into fuel for their advance. Visions hammer him, rocky paling, his fur sloughing into translucent sheaths, yipping, flattening in a monotonic God's eyes. Paradox's lenses clouding the milk, mapping unreadying themselves in reverse, revealing the blank parchment beneath this true cartography of oblivion. The servitors multiply, phasing through walls to flank their tendrils, pressing with a caress that numbs limbs, dulls senses, inducing a euphoric lassitude where flight feels like a surrender's embrace. One tendril grazes his ear, and for an eternity instant, he knows. The whites are not destroyers, but correctors, purging the flaws of multiplicity, the burrows, the bends, the very imperfection of being. For in the plenum's design, one is all, and all is the merciful whiteout. Terror roots in his marrow, abject and visceral, not the sharp stab of peril, but the creeping horror of complicity. The realization that resistance feeds the weave, each hop of thread spun tighter. He claws at a membrane, tearing a rent that screams with the voices of unmade kin, buying moments in a chase that circles eternally. The servitor's drone swelling to a crescendo that fractures the mind's fragile lattice. The labyrinth contracts, membranes funneling Chronobun into a heart weave, a cathedral of interlaced veils, vast as devoured galaxies where the white mother looms, not as form, but as absence, a nimbus of blinding pallor that erases edges. Her presence, a vacuum that draws all into homogeneity, pilgrims orbiting in trances of unbeing, servitors dissolving into her hem. The air thickens to syrup, each inhale diluting the self, thoughts fading like ink in bleach. She speaks not with words, but with a resonance, a vibration that recalibrates the bones, promising euthanasia for the soul's weary pluralism. Tinker of fractures, behold the weave's truth. Your expander mimicked my art, bending the flawed into false infinities. But I unbend, I purify. Yield your resonator, let it melt into the whites, and know the bliss of the singular. No more horrors of the many, no burrows, no voids, no you. Only the eternal blank, where terror ends in embrace. Chronobun resists, resonator overloading in a cascade of burrow chants that shatter veils in shards of reclaimed color, scarlet yips, sapphire maps, emerald regrets flaring against a pallor. The mother recoils not in pain but amusement, her nimbus pulsing to birth new servitors from the fray, whites mirroring his form, anti-clones with floppy ears of bone and eyes of milk, their mimicry a perversion of echoes of his doubts, whispering personal unmakings. No Chronobun, no Chrono, just the white that birthed your illusions. The heart-weave convulses, veils lashing like flagella, pulling him towards the nimbus where assimilation awaits. Emerging that races not with violence, but with indifference, the ultimate horror of irrelevance. In that precipice, dread peaks abject, soul-shredding, the white not as enemy, but as inevitability. The plenums tell us where all tinkers fail, all expansions collapse into the primal nothing. Yet in the resonator's final scream, a glimmer of threat unspooled from the weave itself, hinting at resistance beyond the pale.